Monday.
That's your poem?
No, it isn't actually. That's the first word, but I thought it'd be cool if I just kind of introduced it. And you know, like those very abstract poets who are like, Monday.
They start bowing.
Yeah.
Waiting for the applause.
You have to infer the meaning. But I mean, it's an episode about school, so education.
Mondays.
It's Monday.
For sure.
But the poem goes, Monday, I'm here. All my little futures smiling back at me. Chalkboard, cursive. Little fingers poised to copy me. And that's kind of a first stanza. And I would be sprinkling the rest of the poem in through the episode. I thought it would be kind of a cool narrative thing. I just now thought of that. But that's actually all I wrote of the poem.
Interesting.
Because I didn't really know where to take it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I was going to try and write a poem for the episode, as you asked me, but I didn't. So
Next week.
Next week, yes. That'll be my time to shine. My comedic poetry that sometimes graces this podcast. So welcome back to Solacene, and welcome if you're new. We are a podcast that envisions the ideal future that is beautiful, sustainable, and tactile. And we are currently in our second semester, which is covering the idea of education in the Solacene. And you can watch us on YouTube if you're just listening. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you're sick and tired of our faces,
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
But we're everywhere else. So, first question that we're talking about today is the role of one-on-one mentorship in the Solacene. I like today's episode because so far, the previous 4 episodes in the series, we have been very systemic. We've been talking about education as just this kind of concept. You know, it's a school board, it's a curriculum, it's standardized or it isn't. How can we kind of overhaul it? But today it's like we're recognizing more the individuals that comprise even the most standardized and kind of micromanaged systems.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to mentorship, I was reflecting on my school experience, and I wouldn't say in particular that I ever had a mentor.
No.
Had mentors of sorts, but no specific one person who was a mentor to me.
I don't think it's that common outside of films. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's that common. But I also started with my own experiences. And I went along the similar path. I was thinking, well, who were my mentors in life, in sports, in family, in school? And you come up lacking. I think part of it is because it's difficult to assess your own life like that. Like because we're familiar with them. So you'll be like, oh, well, yeah, my dad, but he doesn't count. Or like, oh, but this guy from church, but they don't really count or whatever. So I think if someone from the outside was maybe looking at your life, it'd be easier for them to assess. But so I started looking at movies. And the best example I could think of, very topical for education, was in Dead Poets Society, Mr. Keating.
I was thinking of him a lot in this episode as well.
The teacher we all wish we had, or just Robin Williams in general. But in that movie, man, what just a spark of life and energy and inspiration.
For sure. That's what mentors are based on all of my research and my experiences. They're people who are excited about life or excited about the topic that you're interested in, and they kind of imbue you with some of that excitement and raison d'etre. And mentors, I was looking into their effect because you never know. You can think that something's really good for you and it's not.
Yeah.
But they are in fact proven to be incredibly good for development at all ages of life.
Yeah, I went on the website youth.gov, which is kind of like a little brother, big brother type program that they have.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
And I would list some of the statistics, but they were just all positive. So it felt kind of silly to cherry pick them. But in terms of graduation, in terms of dropout rates, in terms of drug use, in terms of grades, in terms of the better relationships of the students, the kids who have the mentors with other people in their lives, with their other family members, with their other peers, with their teachers, just healthy.
Yeah.
I've never really subscribed to the people who are kind of like anti-nuclear family and think, you know, people should be raised like entirely in tribes. But there's definitely an element of that. I mean, I think that kids should have more than 2 positive adult role models for sure.
For sure. Yeah, there's somewhere in between probably just a child being flung into a community and said, here, everyone take care of them. And just having what we currently, it seems, there's like 2 adults in your life or oftentimes one adult in your life who
Yeah.
is a role model or a mentor to you. And there's certainly a difference between a mentor and a role model, which I feel like was useful when thinking about my own experiences. There were a lot of role models in my life, but there were only a few people over the years who have genuinely looked at me and taken the time to invest in growing my passions or helping me out, because mentorship is a bit more intentional than role modelship, because role models don't have to know you exist.
Exactly. So it's like a two-sided thing. It's like I don't know, Joe Biden could be a role model, but he's not your mentor.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. I had a quote about it also, because just about that dynamic of it's the young person or the younger person typically looking for the mentor and accepting the mentorship, and also the older person typically, or the more experienced person providing it. And the quote is, if you cannot see where you are going, ask someone who's been there before. And what I was thinking about that is, it's often the youth who struggle with like keeping up their end of mentorship. I don't think that people our age, and especially younger, really are familiar with and comfortable with seeking out help from people older than them. We don't really know how to do it. We don't really feel like it's something to do. Like, it just doesn't occur to us, I think.
Yeah.
So when you're lacking those mentors, you don't notice them. That's part of the problem, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching a TED Talk on mentorship, and the woman who was speaking, she was saying, oh, there's always those people who are older than you in those previous generations who say, oh no, I'm a self-made man, I didn't go to school for this, or what have you. But 9 times out of 10, that person had a mentor who taught them. So it wasn't them perhaps going to school or taking a traditional route by our standards, but it was a traditional route by their standards of, oh, well, this craftsman taught me how to do all this stuff, and then I took over their business, or I took over doing something really similar to them. And I really like mentorship as a concept and think it will be a key part of the Solacene.
I agree. And I kind of broke that presence down into 3 different areas, I guess. So I thought of mentorship in school, teachers, etc., mentorship with other children, and also mentorship outside of school. And in school, obviously, this is kind of closest to what we've been talking about so far with teachers and Dead Poets Society. I think a key part of increasing, would you say, the connection or just the modeling behavior between teachers and students, not just with regards to the calculus they're teaching, is schools kind of taking off the clamps a little bit and letting teachers express their personality and just their humanity in ways that, you know, maybe can color the 1 hour of smartboard equations. You know what I'm talking about? That's one of the things I loved about university, actually, was that it was funny because all through high school, they were telling us that in university, well, your professor's going to be so distant from you, it's a giant lecture hall, and it won't be such a close relationship as it is in the classrooms in high school. But I found it to be the opposite. I thought the professors showed a lot more of themselves, and I got a much more of a grasp of who they were than I did my high school teachers, actually.
Yeah, for sure. You had that one teacher who really loved birds, right?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, and and you'd teach like the lectures about conservation as a whole, right?
Yeah.
But then when you'd get to the bird topics, it'd be
well, that's always,
super in-depth.
it's always excellent when teachers are enthusiastic about things. I love that, whatever the topic, because even if it's a topic that you really don't like, I mean, I'm not much of an ornithologist myself, but you can't help but take some of that passion into you. Yeah,
for sure. And getting back to Dead Poets Society, and you said just the freedom to express yourself. In that movie, he doesn't have the freedom, he has to kind of hide it, right?
Yeah.
He can't actually just be like shouting Keats or whatever from the rooftops, but he still did it. And so in the Solacene, we would facilitate that type of classroom or that type of school environment in which teachers are allowed to be crazy. Going back to Hogwarts for the 100th time in this series, the teachers are allowed to do stuff that they wouldn't be allowed to do in normal classrooms because it wasn't too standardized. It was just, okay, this week we're going to be learning about flapperworms or whatever. Yeah. And then next week we're going to be learning about unicorns. And that was just all up to the teacher. It wasn't mandated. And then it allowed the students to build relationships and understand the teachers, which is the key to good learning, is if there's respect that comes from authority and from experience, instead of just, they're your teacher, you have to respect them. The respect has to be kind of earned by, like, both ways. by expertise and experience and proving that you're someone to look up to, I suppose.
No, I think Hogwarts is a really good example because there's just how many teachers pass through that school in the 6 years that we spend there in the books and movies. It's a lot of different teachers. They have a range of different teaching styles. I mean, I know it's a magic world, but it's just a full spectrum of stuff and autonomy that the teachers show. So I would say, I mean, in real life, the teachers can't be just choosing punishments willy-nilly like does Mad Eye in the 4th book. But it would be great if teachers could have the freedom to completely decorate their classrooms how they wanted. And in a lot of today's schools, that's not allowed, which is, that's an example. Or having whatever kind of pets they want in the classroom.
That's true. Yeah, this week we're going to be looking at
Grindylows.
Grindylows, yes. So make sure you wear your gloves because they bite.
I was thinking another thing about, I guess, respect and mentorship and just allowing the teachers to be human is an acknowledgement on the part of the teachers that they will make mistakes. And there's a kind of humility that required, and especially for teenage years. I mean, for younger children, this isn't really necessary, but for teen years, I mean, there's already kind of often would you say, a hostility brewing or like an apathy among a lot of adolescents when they enter the classroom.
They want the teacher to mess up.
Yeah, they want it. I remember there was this one really, really infamous in my history math teacher that I had in grade 8. And we were just constantly at odds. And there were 3 of us, 3 students in the middle of the classroom who kept a tally over the year of all the mistakes he made going through equations. And it just entered my recollection this week when I was preparing for the episode. Like I'd completely forgotten about it. But then I was like, okay, that wasn't a very nice thing of us to do. But it was because he had kind of created this atmosphere of, I'm always right. You guys always have to shut up and listen to me. And so that didn't create we weren't very forgiving, basically.
Yeah, it's funny to me because I'm the least rebellious person, I think. Would you say I'm not rebellious?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. But in grade 8, I also had a math teacher who we did the exact same thing for because we disliked him so much. He was just mean. He didn't let you ever speak. And if you ever corrected him or you ever asked a question, he would just say, well, it's in the textbook. And we were kids. Like, we weren't at an age where we could fully understand something. Or if something was too easy and we'd say, hey, we all get this. Why are you making us keep practice it? He was a very mean person. And didn't like him, kept a tally, but yeah.
Yeah, I would never do something like that as a grown-up because, I mean, now we have more empathy about, we don't know what the teacher was going through and all that kind of stuff. But as a kid, you have to kind of present the front that, you're starting, it's kind of an uphill battle for a lot of teachers, is what I'm saying. And another thought I had with regards to modeling behavior and teachers is the actual staff environment between teachers. The way that they interact with each other filters down to the kids a lot. And it's not one-on-one mentorship, but it's kind of a collective modeling because school is like a mini society in itself.
It's true.
It's like this is how grown-ups behave.
Yeah.
So students will mirror that.
Yeah, I'm taking a course on the future of education. I think I've mentioned it before, but the current semester chapter that I'm on is about teaching and what makes a good teacher. And there was this expert on the subject, and he was saying, well, it really depends on the school and on the environment and who you're teaching. But overall, one of the key things he said was that the teachers need to remember that they're not individuals, that they're within a community, within a school community, and that they're not alone, and that they can't just isolate their lessons from all the other teachers, and they can't model, as you said, isolation. They need to model community and collaboration and anonymity between the other teachers in the school. And I was also looking into mentorship between teachers, and apparently that's incredibly effective. If there's a new teacher in a school, an older one or a more experienced one takes them under their wing, it retains the teachers and it creates just a better academic environment for everyone involved.
Right.
Yeah.
You see that did you ever have a student teacher? Was it like that? Was it you got to see the mentorship in front of your eyes or? Sometimes,
but sometimes, no.
I actually really liked the atmosphere that my high school teachers showed amongst themselves. There was they were always kind of popping in and out of each other's classrooms, and it's always like an Easter egg. It's like when you're watching the Marvel movie, like Spider-Man's in this one too. It's like what is the math teacher doing in here? And that's so mind blowing to you as a kid. Actually, in university, I think there's a little bit more kind of segregation of professors, which I mean it makes more sense, but still.
Yeah, our high school had pods.
Pods.
So it would be the English pod, the math pod, and so on. But there was one of my English teachers, they would just always have the door open between the classrooms and just talk while we were working. It always cracked me up. But then sometimes if your friend was in the next door classroom, the friends would mingle too.
Well, that sounds...
It wasn't productive, but it was because we were in like an advanced English, and then there was just a high school level English class.
I see.
And it was our friends who used to be in the advanced ones. They'd come over and like just take the lessons with us. It was fun. I feel like I'm getting really off topic today.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to mentorship between children in school. I was thinking that it's a very positive when there's more kind of mingling between different age groups. And two examples that came to my mind, one positive, one negative, was in my elementary school, we did something called book buddies.
We did book buddies too.
Which is when you had a class of younger children. I think there were, well, actually, it was every grade was involved. So it was like the grade 2s were involved with book buddies with the grade 5s, grade 1s with grade 4s, and so on. And it was basically one grade 5 kid paired off with one grade 2 kid. They would go somewhere. They had a weird amount of freedom to just go where they wanted.
You could just go anywhere in the school, it felt like.
Read with them. And I used to love it. I used to think it was great. Yeah,
it was so cool. I remember trying to like track down my book buddy at some point along the line. So I was like, I wonder where she's at now. Never was able to find her.
You had the same one every time?
We did for a couple years.
Yeah, we mixed it up.
Then it would kind of mix up. Yeah. But I remember, I only was book buddies with her in grade 1 and 2. But I remember her telling me about this club she was going to join in high school. And then I joined that club in high school.
Ooh.
And it stuck with me from grade 1 and 2.
Oh, so you were actually a book buddy, like you were a small one?
Yeah.
I was never a small one.
I guess you weren't in Canada.
Yeah. Which did you prefer? Like, which did you think was more beneficial to you?
Probably the small book buddy.
Yeah.
But I really liked being a big book buddy. But it didn't happen all of our years as we were older, so I had less of an experience with that.
Yeah, I always thought that it was a great advantage that I had that I have 2 younger sisters. Because it's like, kids don't really get any autonomy over anything. I mean, it's kind of a cliche in like a movie or something. It's like, oh, he's getting his first dog, so that's really a big deal. But pet's not that big a deal. You don't have to do that much for it. So, yeah, I think book buddies is really good. And another example I had was, for some reason at all my schools, the playground, there were pretty much 2 playgrounds, and they were segregated between the younger kids had one playground and the older kids had one. And I understand why, because it's to minimize accidents. But also, come on, the playgrounds are supervised anyway, so there's not going to be too much roughhousing.
Yeah.
So it always created this kind of like weird taboo or like excitement when you were actually like playing around with a younger kid or an older kid, or when you got to sit beside them on a bus.
That's true. Yeah, I definitely think that's crucial to developing children's autonomy, as you said, and their confidence and themselves as a human, because how we learn best, as we'll get to later in the episode, is by modeling other people.
Yeah.
And so if you're just only exposed to kids your age, for the most part, you're not really advancing that effectively because you're just modeling a bunch of people doing the same thing. But if you're exposed to those older kids or adults or community members, then you're going to be able to model better behaviors or stronger behaviors or interests more effectively.
Another thought I had was not just like mentorship via the diversity of age groups, but also diversity of interests and backgrounds. So like I had the thought in my head of like Drake and Josh, all those movies where the nerd and the jock kind of tutor each other. One's teaching the other one to get good grades or to pass the class, and the other one's teaching the other one to get girls or something. I don't know how often that happens in real life, but there is definitely this segregation. I mean, cliques aren't what they used to be for sure, but it's kind of like in a lot of schools, the only chance you get to be in a small group setting with other kids is in class when you have a project or something, and usually you get to choose that, so you're just going to choose your friends. So extracurriculars are really important because you may not be in the same math classes as one guy, but maybe you both really like poetry. So if you have a poetry club, you can kind of bounce ideas off each other in there.
I like that. Because teachers aren't always going to be able to, there's one teacher for every 2 kids or something. Like there's always going to be more kids than there are teachers, even in the Solacene. But I think one of the key ways to develop kids and as good community members is by partnering them with people in the community. Because then you could do, okay, these kids are interested in gardening, or there's an exploratory, we did that in middle school, where you'd go to a senior's home, where you'd go and pick up trash with different community members and build relationships and integrate yourself into your place a little bit better. and also develop your interests. And you switch it up a little bit. Every few weeks you'd switch to a different topic, but I think that'd be a key way of allowing more one-on-one, or at least like 1-on-3 experience.
No, I agree. And I also think it helps make the kids feel safe in environments outside of school and home, which is obviously something that, I mean, there's been books written about it today, helicopter parenting and just the lack of play on the streets and kind of freedom in a town that kids have. And we know why that is. And there's a lot of modern knowledge which supports that. But I do think that modern knowledge can actually doesn't have to be kind of counter to the old-fashioned freedoms that a lot of kids had. It can complement it, and it can, make things safe, but also free for kids, as we talked about that balance last week that needs to be struck.
We were talking about earlier today amongst ourselves that we don't need to just describe, okay, neighborhoods are unsafe. You can say, okay, neighborhoods are unsafe. Why? How can we fix that? How can we get kids back to this point of freedom, but even better, even safer? And I think that's important in our thinking, because often when we hear the news, we say, oh, well, it's not safe to do this, or, oh, this food's bad for you. It's like, but why is it all of a sudden bad for you to eat this food? Or why is it all of a sudden bad for you to go into this lake? Yeah. Pollution, GMOs, whatever it is.
It's all learning opportunities as well for kids.
For sure.
What do you want to talk about next?
The organism of the week.
Oh, the organism, okay.
Okay, so here's my image of the organism of the week. It's not actually blue. I just couldn't find a black marker.
Okay, so the mongoose.
Can you describe it for those at home?
Yes, it is a four-legged mammal with a face kind of like a fox. The face is weirdly well drawn. There's a lot of shading, which is weirdly not well done. A very long and thick club-like tail, and it looks rather agile.
Yes. So a mongoose. I didn't know much about them until today.
I'll be honest, I knew the name and I knew there was a creature. I didn't know that this creature was the mongoose.
It doesn't look like what I thought a mongoose was. I thought a mongoose kind of goose was a bit more platypusy or
a bit weirder.
Goosey. But it just kind of looks like a fox.
Yeah.
Fox, it looks like our cat Oliver.
That's really helpful to the listeners.
To the three of you who know who Oliver is.
But yeah, it looks like Oliver.
So just picture Oliver. So it's a small mammal, as you said, but it's semi-aquatic.
Ooh. Hence the tail.
Yeah, and there's 34 species of mongoose. So there's a bunch of different types. And they live kind of all over. They're just little critters. They're 7 inches for the smallest ones. Some of them are 2 feet.
That's what I was imagining though. Yeah. 7 inches. That sounds more magical to me.
I know.
It's like a house hippo.
It's pretty cool. The reason I picked the mongoose is because they have mentorships amongst each other. So sometimes they are social creatures, and sometimes they just live on their own, but they teach each other stuff, including an alarm call. So if one of them, even if they're one of the free mongoose who don't interact with other humans, if they sense danger, they still sound an alarm call because they've been taught growing up that if you're in danger, let everyone know around just in case there's another mongoose nearby. They're threatened, but they're also threatening other species because they're
good for them.
Crazy predators, apparently, and they eat a lot of meat. They're omnivores, but they're mainly carnivores. Mongoose. Pretty cool guys. I like them. Some of them live in treetops. Some of them live in holes.
That's a big variation.
I know.
But what a great tie-in to the episode.
Thank you.
How does she do it?
Weeks and weeks of practice.
Do you practice the organism of the week by yourself?
No.
What do you want to talk about next? That's a really great transition.
Back to the question of what's next. We can talk about cool, tangible teaching techniques.
Sure, the CTTT.
Yeah. So, when I was thinking about ways that teachers can teach tangibly, I thought the internet would be crawling with examples and ideas for teachers. It's not. So I had to dig into my past experience and come up with some new ideas.
Yeah, once you told me that the internet was no help, and I didn't really figure it would be. Because the internet tends to love the internet is one thing about it. So I just assumed that all the techniques would be remote learning.
They were.
Asymmetrical teaching and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of looked into my experience as well, but I came up with really broad categories, and unfortunately, I don't think it's anything that reinvents the wheel. So I apologize to the listeners for that. But it's less like cool, new, tangible teaching techniques and more like cool, tangible teaching techniques that work. because a lot of teaching techniques I don't really think work. And I know I'm just talking through my lens, but I tried to remember also how my whole class was affected by it. And you can tell when you're in the class. It's kind of like when you're watching a movie. You can tell when everybody's transfixed by something. The first example that I came up with, and these are all kind of for all subjects, and I guess just doesn't even have to be in school, but I kind of had one in mind for each one. So this one I was thinking about math, science, more kind of boring and abstract topics like that. The first one is showing students the end game of a topic or a subject. And this can be as short term as saying, these are the kind of problems that you're going to be solving by the end of the semester. Just a really, really complicated equation that the kids at the start of the year have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
Or as long term as saying, here's someone who works in the field. This is why you need to know this. This is what you can actually be doing with it. And I think this does a few things. One, it presents the topic of the concept in a way which the kids don't understand at all, completely goes over their heads. And I think in a way that can sometimes be more enthralling, more intriguing, more interesting than if it's kind of incremental at the start and they know a little bit about it each time, but there's something that they don't know, because then they focus on that one thing they don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
And it also answers the question of, what do I need this for? Why am I doing this? Which plagues schools, and rightly so.
Yeah, for sure. And I find the context allows you to know the questions to ask, because sometimes when you start from scratch and don't know where you're going with it, you say, I don't even know what I don't know. But if you know what you don't know to start with, it allows you to work towards that and ask the right questions.
Another example I had aside from math was like different languages. Like I don't know a word of German, but I hear the language right now and I'm like, that sounds so magical. But now that I'm learning French, I'm halfway through it, the magic starts to wear off a little bit.
Yeah,
so things when they're presented to you like awesomely, and students will approach them also awesomely. That's my Jack Black coming out again. I don't know what it is about this, the hot seat.
Yeah, you were talking about the experts in the field and stuff. And one of my ideas was either co-teaching on subjects, which I've had throughout my education, or guest speakers, or field trips to places. Go to the science museum, go to the farm, or what have you. And co-teaching in particular I find incredible, because I realized it wasn't university the first time this was introduced to me. Rather, my grade 10 science classes were co-taught. There were 4 teachers, one for each subject, one for physics, chemistry. We did astronomy, and then we did, what else? We did biology. So it was all of the upper year teachers. So you know that they're experts, and it made you respect them more than just this one teacher kind of fumbling through the 4 subjects, that they know a little bit in each. Rather, we had the experts in each one, which was really great, and I found it really made stuff stick. It was also, when you're in normal school, you're there for a year. So if you have the same teacher for a year, you're going to get a little bit boring of their style of teaching. And so it really mixed things up a lot, and I liked it.
Yeah. Also, this is slightly off topic, but I was thinking about a question for next week. Could be about self-teaching methods, especially for people outside of school, because we haven't really tackled adult learning yet. So it's like, how can we keep...
I think that's an excellent question.
Keep that same energy from high school or university or whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure.
My next point is kind of a continuation of my first. It's just about inspiring students. And I had in mind for this more artsy classes. I remember in university, my favorite course was an art class, and I would always get there early, and so would many other students. And before the time that was scheduled, the professor would have set up a giant projection on the front screen of all the paintings that we were going to be studying that day, on kind of a cycle. So you'd see them all, but each one would take the full screen. And that was just really, really inspiring to walk into the room being all dark, except for these giant paintings by all the masters. And similarly, in high school, when we were studying the Odyssey, on a little bit of a lesser scale, my world history teacher would write on the board just a quote from whatever we'd be reading that day, because we kind of read through the book as a class on the whiteboard, and he wouldn't be analyzing it. He would just write it for people who got there early. And I always thought that was a really nice touch, because it doesn't take that much effort, but it just sets the tone in a really nice way.
That's really lovely. A creative technique that I was thinking of were 2 things. One was I took a course in high school, and it was theater, just a theater course, but it was in French. And probably the most effective technique I've ever used for learning French was we had to, for our final project, write and perform a play. So we had to write it from scratch with stage directions and everything, and then perform it. And for years after that was in grade 9 or 10, my friends and I would be quoting this play in French that we wrote.
Yeah.
Which, what else can I quote in French? Not much. But it was super effective, and I thought that was really great and tangible in a way that it really made the topic stick, and I think it could be applied for languages, but also for other creative subjects. So perform this book or perform an interpretation of this painting or what have you.
Yeah.
So it could be applied to other things other than just language learning. And I think it really makes you stick because you have to memorize your lines and you have to conceptualize it in space.
Yeah, and also things get solidified by the observation of the rest of your class watching you. You know,
For sure.
That burns it into your mind. We will
Yeah.
remember word for word those ill-fated presentations from our pasts.
We do. It's true. And another creative technique that I read about is used in Waldorf schools, and it's getting kids to illustrate their notes and their notebooks, because we all do that, but it's not allowed. It's not
Encouraged.
illegal, but it's not encouraged to doodle in your notes. But in Waldorf teaching techniques, it's sometimes encouraged for kids to illustrate their notes.
Yeah.
And it allows them to have pride in their work. Because it becomes a bit more beautiful. It's a little bit more, you've embodied it. And I found, because I read about it, like doodling when I was in university, and it's effective for memorizing stuff, is just doing doodles of, like, as you're kind of hearing the information and interpreting it in these abstract ways, and it makes stuff stick a little bit more.
Well, I would say maybe it's that sometimes when professors are saying things, or even a slideshow or a PowerPoint is showing words, you are trying to write so quickly that you're not actually taking in what you're writing. That's happened to me before. Whereas if you're genuinely listening to them, then you almost don't even have to look at the page to be kind of drawing it. You know, it takes a little bit less time and effort to draw something than it does to copy down the script.
Yeah.
And I would say, I mean, not every kid is a doodler. I kind of flip back and forth. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But what you said about making the notes beautiful is definitely a thing that I like. And it's something that's caught on big time in the last few years, right? With like
Studygram.
Studygram, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah, there's whole social media tips about how to make your notes more presentable. And people might think that's superficial and it's like, oh, well, they should be focusing more on the content. But, you know, the presentation of it that helps people remember it, or at least that's been my experience. I liked what you also said about theatre. That was kind of my third idea, was just emphasizing the theatre, not just of theatre classes or even of literary classes, but just of everything. The theatre, the play acting that is education. Because it is a kind of silly concept. It's like, well, today we're reading these physics rules from 400 years ago. You know, so, and often they do kind of a token history lesson before each scientific topic is introduced,
for sure.
like Robert Hooke, the cell. We know these names and we know these dates, but it doesn't mean anything to us, and there's no point really the way that it's currently taught. But I do think it's important to know Newton and not just his laws.
Yeah.
So I think it would be more interesting if we kind of emphasize to the students, try and get in his mind.
The drama
of it. Yeah, try and get in his heads. Don't just focus on the dates that he came up with these things, but really try and act like him, try and think like him. And it also highlights this idea of the student or Newton as a predecessor to everyone in the classroom, which is, you know, it's like you're playing out your ancestors.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. One cool thing that we did in school that I think could be applied in the Solacene is I didn't actually get to do it, but both my sisters did, because there was this one teacher who I never got. Anyway, long story. But they grew monarch butterflies in the classroom all year. So they got them as little larvae, and then they watched them cocoon, and then they obviously sprouted into butterflies, and they went and released them in this place. And can you imagine how cool that'd be? Did you get to do something like that?
Well, my workplace did it every summer.
True. Yes. But yeah, this classroom, they did monarchs. One year they did frogs. They got the little tadpoles and everything.
We did frogs, and we also did chicks one year.
That's so cool.
You didn't do anything like that?
Chicks. No, I always got skipped in those years.
So we did chicks, and this was the class that I was talking about on a previous week. It was a very small classroom. There was only so we each had a chick.
Oh my goodness.
So we had the eggs, and we were so excited. We were watching them for however long. I don't remember it now. It was a long time ago, but for however long. And we had a very would you say, like, maternal teacher. She was very close with all of us, I would say. We were small, and there was only a few of us. And she was like that with the chicks as well. She was very kind of like taking care of them. And when they were really close to hatching, she said something like, one day I just got the intuition, and she drove to the school at night because there were a bunch of them that weren't hatching properly. So she had to like help them out. And she was
Oh
like,
my goodness.
I salvaged what I could, but a few of them died, which was sad. But
Yeah.
I always thought that was a really weird story.
But it stuck.
Yeah.
And you probably know all about the life cycle of a chicken.
More than I would if I hadn't done that, most likely, yeah.
Exactly. So I think growing things, maybe it doesn't have to be animals. I don't know the ethics of animals. But it could be plants, or it could be just cultivating something and seeing the whole life cycle of a product or of a food or a plant.
Yeah.
I think it's very effective in solidifying things in kids' minds.
But I think it's part of the theatre and it's part of the play acting of making the classroom a mini version of some part of the whole world, mini version of a farm, mini version of a UN conference.
Yeah.
Everyone's staging a debate or something like that. We did something like that in university, right?
Yes. One of us did.
Did. For a sustainability course, we were each assigned a country and we had to do, how many kids were in the class? Like 150?
There was a lot, yeah.
In these huge lecture halls, kind of
a full-on model UN.
Yeah.
But we had like the Slack going, and it was a whole thing. It was
very
stressful. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well, not for me.
Not for you. No. You were an oil were you an oil company or an oil state? I don't remember.
I know that you were Kenya.
I was Kenya. They didn't have much to say, unfortunately. But that was effective in teaching me about how to partake in a debate, because otherwise I'd have no idea how to do it formally. And another university course that came to mind was this one where the teacher, bless his heart, he was trying something. He every single week would do a simulation or a game or whatever, and it was just his class was at a bad time, so everyone was exhausted and it was really grumbly. But I then went on to TA for that course for 2 years, and from an outside perspective, I realized just how effective these teaching techniques were and saw the kids actually grasping the concepts in real time. And he'd do games. He'd say, okay, 1 week we all like brought $1, and we had to, I think we just had to like come up with different tasks for each other to do to like try and win the most dollars by the end of the class. And they were all about leadership techniques and management techniques and like human interactions.
Yeah.
And so with the $1 one, there was real stakes because you could win a bunch of money.
An insight into your experience on the capitalist conveyor belt.
Yeah.
That is a business degree.
Yeah. But then there was other weeks when we'd do debates or we'd do presentations. We'd always have to like, okay, this week we're doing a presentation on a movie and relating it to the concepts. And he did a really excellent job. He's the one who assigned us the portfolio that I was talking about last week.
Yep.
So this teacher, he would always do these hands-on things. He'd go above and beyond to like bring them into the classroom. Sometimes it'd be simulations like an Everest climbing. And it was like, oh, you died. You ran out of oxygen. It was fun and it taught a lot. And I think that can be brought into the classroom at all levels, a bit more simulation and games.
I agree. I do think gamification as a concept in education and just in, I don't know, advertising, in storytelling in general, just in society, was a good idea, but has maybe been taken in some, like it doesn't just have to be Kahoot.
I know.
And call it a day. So I agree, because we had a French game called Woogaroo, which we used to play in elementary school and middle school.
Yeah.
Which I adored, and it taught me the word for werewolf, which I otherwise wouldn't have known.
Exactly.
Games can be a little bit more interesting than just see who can answer the questions the quickest and the best.
Yeah, for sure. But still, that's fun. Points. I was thinking of a point system in the classroom to an extent would be fun, with like, oh, who answers the questions? Because people like racking up points even if they have no consequences for some reason. And 2 more things that I had were outdoor learning, because did you guys ever do like outdoor classrooms at your school?
One time.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah. We had like an official outdoor classroom where the teachers would book and we'd go out sometimes. And no matter what we were learning out there, it was a change of scenery. And it would always stick better than when it was in the classrooms.
I mean, that's true, because I do remember the one class we had outside. It was on mitosis.
There you go. And the other thing I was thinking, I've been watching a lot of kind of vintage movies lately. And I find in the high schools, they always have like parent nights. And I never know what they do with these parent nights. They're kind of like recitals. They're kind of, the kids are giving presentations. But I feel like a bit more of that would be fun. I know the parents right now are very busy, but ideally in the Solacene, they'd have a bit more time to attend such events, and the community could come out, all the guardians and everyone's families could come out and see them presenting or doing recitals. I think that has, like, having something to work towards that's like tangible, I find is useful for kids to learn
so it's
things.
like something the kids have to prepare something for.
Yes.
No, that is good. And it also, I liked going to school at night, and it's humanizes the teachers, as we were talking about for mentorship, because right now it's, there's that meme about, oh, when I saw that teacher in the grocery store, it just felt so wrong. But it really shouldn't. Like, they are humans, and kids should know that. It's not like, it's funny, but it's not actually that good a thing that kids think that they live there.
Yeah.
Because it means they're not really understanding the world. And school's not doing its job to make them understand what is life, what are jobs, who are adults.
I know. Yeah, it's very true. And so all of this time, we've been talking a bit about learning and more effective ways to learn. But then we asked ourselves the meta question, what is learning?
What is learning?
What is life?
Yeah, I didn't go too deep into this. I started in the natural spot, which is Nintendo. Or video game design in general. I was thinking about how each game, and within each game, each level, has to quickly teach the player rules, how to navigate them, and also how to provide a place where they can get really good at them. So it's kind of like a mini version of a classroom.
Yeah, that's really true.
And Nintendo has this kind of famous philosophy, which is a 4-step philosophy. You'll see it a lot in Mario levels, where each level will have some central kind of gimmick or like animating principle. And the first step will be to introduce it. So let's say it's like spinning platforms, to introduce it in a safe way. So let's say the ground underneath it just recycles you back to the start, so you don't die. And then once you prove that you can get past that, it's the same thing, but with genuine peril. So the safety net's kind of removed. After that, for step 3, they do a twist on the concept. So maybe the platform's swinging the other way, or maybe there's enemies on it. And then for the 4th step, it's kind of like a final gauntlet, or to bring it back to the school, a final exam. And what was really interesting, because I'd known this kind of philosophy for a long time, was that when I was researching further for this question this week, in education, there's a very famous 4-step theory.
There is, yeah.
You know about that?
I do. Do, review, learn, apply.
Yeah.
That's the one you're talking about, because there's
Kind
a
of.
lot of learning theory.
There are a lot of learning theories.
Yeah.
The one I had was this guy called David Kolb, and he published a theory in 1984. I think he was like an educational academic. And it's a circle.
Yep.
And it has a lot of different labels on it. So I encourage people to look it up. But it's a clockwise circle showing the 4 stages people go through when they're learning things. So I guess it's kind of like, what did you say? Do, review,
learn, apply.
Do, review, learn, apply. It is essentially that. So the first step is the observation of concrete experiences. Second step is to build theory based on that.
Yeah.
Third step is to form conclusions based on the theory, learn. And then 4th step is to test it in new situations, apply.
Yeah, the one that I'm using is based on his, but it wasn't written by him, those 4 words. But I think it's interesting to think about learning, and his theory is really useful because there's no definitive what does it mean to have learned something. Does it mean you can write it on an exam? Does it mean you can kind of copy and paste it? Oh, I know it until I input that phone number into my phone, but then as soon as I input it, it's gone. And something I learned that blew my mind is that, because you always say to me, if you don't remember it, it's not useful, right?
For some things, for creative ideas, yeah, I would say that.
But I learned that is not true because our brains sometimes forget stuff by mistake that it doesn't want to forget, but it forgets it.
No, I know that. You're making me sound like such a tyrant. I'm just over here like shouting things at you. Oh, if you forget it, then
no, but
you're meant to forget it.
I mean, it's not just you. It's a bias that a lot of people have. It's called the forgetting bias, and it's that if we forget it, it can't be important. But that's not true. So that means like learning isn't just remembering, it's embodying it, it's creating a change in the way that you see the world and interact with the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's just the way that creative people kind of rationalize all the things they forget. Because you have so many ideas for poems, for stories, for characters, for lines, or for paintings, or for films, or whatever it may be, or for songs. And you forget a lot of them, obviously.
And it's kind of a justification not to write stuff down. It's like, oh, you shouldn't write it down because if it's good,
it's like a mental filter is what it tries to be, I think.
Yeah.
But also it means that when you forget something, you don't cry over the spilt milk.
It's true.
The spilt ideas. The spilt oils. Something else for this, I was thinking about what is learning, is the elasticity of the brain that I've been reading about, which just fascinates me. I know this is something that pretty much everyone is interested in, is how can I maximize my brain? How can I stay alert, stay nimble, stay learning through adulthood? What kind of little luminosity phone games can I do that will keep me at the brain age of a 25-year-old or whatever it may be? So I thought that could be a question for next week. How can we kind of form habits?
I like that.
How does forming good habits affect learning or something like that?
Yeah, I also wanted to ask the question for next week, what is a good teacher?
Yeah, that's good. Because it's not just one type.
Yeah.
And this just came to my mind as well. In high school, when they would always say, we're not really about the goal of high school isn't really for teaching you the things, it's teaching you how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I always took issue with that in high school. And I think I still do. What do you think about it?
I think we need to know how to learn, but I think we should be learning things in high school.
Yeah. And I think we should learn how to learn earlier.
Yes, I agree. And we should be learning things as we learn to learn. Yeah.
Ooh.
I have a good quote about learning that I think summarizes this question very well. And it says, learning is a process that is often not under our control and is wrapped up with the environment we inhabit and our relationships we make. It involves encountering signals from the senses, attending to them, looking for connections and meanings, and framing them so that we may act.
Very nice.
Thank you. But that's what learning is to me. It's making connections and being able to act upon them later, because you can act upon it immediately, recall it on a test, or even apply it tactily, like in a lab or in a setting where you have to perform.
Yeah.
But to learn something really, I think, has to be a change in the way you perceive the world, in the way that you perform tasks and create understanding of new inputs.
Internalize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
So thank you all for listening. And if you'd like to follow us on Instagram or TikTok, we're there. We also have our zine for sale on our website. And there's all the links to everything down in the description. So just look there. See you all next week. Bye.